We won't get to do that in the days when there's no mourning anymore. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. I very specifically asked the Lord this week why sometimes it doesn't feel like it. Anybody ever walk something where it just doesn't feel like maybe your prayers are getting through? It doesn't feel like he's right here with you. Lord, I know you are, but how am I missing this? There's a couple of things. We're going to look at a story in just a minute in the Bible that I think shows us all kinds of ways that God comforts us and how we miss it. But first, I want to highlight that this idea of him comforting us is not the fix-it man. So we had a situation a couple weeks ago when our dishwasher broke. Anybody ever had a major appliance of convenience break? This is tragic for our household. You know, when earlier in our marriage and when we had young kids and we're just trying to keep up with everything that young families do, we never really had a nice dishwasher. We had the loud ones. We had the ones that were a little rusty with all the things in the wrong places, so you really couldn't load it well. And the day came where we got to get a new dishwasher. So my husband did his research, looked at all kinds of things, figured out all kinds of things, and he set his heart and his hopes on this one particular dishwasher. It even had the third rack up at the top. Does anybody have the third rack? That's lovely. It's lovely. And so we went and we got the dishwasher. He loved this dishwasher. So much so that it was the one thing in the house I was a little afraid to touch. I'd drive his truck before I loaded and ran the dishwasher. And then the Lord spoke to our hearts, and we sold the house and moved, and we bought a new house, and he was so happy to find out that it had an old crummy dishwasher, and we had the chance to buy a new dishwasher. So he went and got the same dishwasher, and it's been faithful. It's been faithful to us until it wasn't. And we started noticing that, like, the soap wouldn't thing, and it would stop, like, mid-cycle. Probably more detail than you wanted to know. So anyway, we had back-to-back events at our house, so now we're like buying paper plates and everything like that, because who wants to do all of the dishes when you don't have a dishwasher? It was a struggle in the Womack household. And I called my daughter was over, and I was lamenting about not having a dishwasher to Kenzie. And I'll be honest, I wanted a little sympathy from her because it was hard. What I forgot was I was talking to a new mom who doesn't have a dishwasher. So as I'm lamenting, she's like, no sympathy. She's like, you are telling the wrong person. She had none. There wasn't even empathy coming from this child. She was just ready for a dishwasher herself. So I wanted comfort there, and I didn't get it. The repairman came. What do you think I wanted from the repairman? Yes, I didn't care about sympathy. Fix the dishwasher. Find out what's wrong. And he's looking at it. Kurt's camping. He's looking at it, and he's like, it's doing everything right. I'm like, it is not. Like, you're going to find out what's wrong with this, or you're not leaving. I didn't care about sympathy. I wasn't looking to build a relationship. I need him to know what's wrong, to diagnose a problem and fix it now. And it turned out he was able eventually to figure out what was wrong, but it was going to take a week to get the part in and to fix it. God's not our repairman like that. Hear me. He has complete restoration for us. He has complete reconciliation for us. He is our answer to every dilemma, every problem, every question. And he is making a way to deal with all of this sin and evil on our behalf. But when I find myself in a spot and all I want is a quick fix to make it feel better and make it easier, he is not my repairman. He's my Savior. He's my Lord. He cares more about me learning how to be able to fix my eyes on him and trust him and know him than he ever would about whether I got to do my own dishes by hand or not, or whether I have to stay in this uncomfortable spot. We miss God's comfort sometimes because he didn't fix it. When we would go, I would train our volunteers for City Hope to go out and to run these same types of calls. And I would tell them all the time, it's not our job to fix it. We can't. But we can sure help. We can sure bring peace. We can sure be present in their situation. And you know what that ended up doing? It ended up helping. This same 17 or 15-year-old girl that was crying when I walked in for her mom, within 2 or 3 hours, was sitting up and through tears of joy as much as sorrow telling me stories about her and her mom. I can't fix it, but being present, I was able to help. And if we can do that for each other, how much more, just by the very nature of God and what he brings into our morning, does he help? There's something about us learning to trust him. When Kurt and I have gone through hard times in our marriage, it's solidified the fact that we can go through hard times together. You start off saying sickness and in health and richer or poorer, and then we all get a little grouchy when we get sick. And we all get a little grouchy when it's a little bit more on the poorer side than the richer side, and all of these things. But when you go through it, you know you can. It builds an intimacy. It builds a trust. It builds a confidence. And our morning, when God comes and comforts us, it builds that as we walk this with him. We don't actually need the quick fix. If we were honest, even though that might be our immediate thought of what we want, we would much prefer to walk with a greater understanding of who our God is. To have him present with us, for us to know it. This is the value of the kingdom. This is why it's blessed to mourn and to learn that you can trust your Jesus. To trust that even though we don't have all the answers, he has them for us. So the first reason we miss being comforted is because we don't get the quick fix that sometimes we think. We don't get the immediate deposit into the checking account. We don't get the immediate healing. We don't get the immediate thing. And we think, where is he? That relationship isn't immediately restored. We don't have freedom immediately from that addiction or that sin. And we think, what in the world? Where is he? Oh, he's right there with you. Right there. And he's going to walk this with you. Blessed are you if you mourn, because you're going to be comforted. Let's look at 2 guys who were in a situation where they missed a little bit God's comfort. This is the road to Emmaus. It's one of my favorite stories. And here we have Jesus had died. There had been the crucifixion. And there's these guys that are walking down the road. Luke 24, verse 13. That same day, 2 of Jesus' followers were walking to the village of Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things, Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them. But God kept them from recognizing him. Okay, anybody ever have a suddenly? Where something's going on and suddenly you just know that God's there. I love the fact that they didn't even know. Listen, sometimes we're not comforted. We don't feel the comfort because we don't even recognize he's right there. He is right there. You've had your suddenly, and he has come, and he's right there walking with you in the midst of your doubt, in the midst of our discouragement, in the midst of our questions, in the midst of our bigger questions. He is right there walking with us, and his mere presence has brought peace and hope and wisdom and love and compassion, and it's brought his whole nature right into your situation. Sometimes I think we need to just stop and be like, you're already here. And recognize what he brings with him. Call our spirit man to attention to recognize him. He asked them, what are you discussing so intently as you walk along? They stopped short, sadness written across their face. They were mourning. They were mourning. Then one of them, Cleopas, replied that you must be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened here these last few days. What things? Jesus asked. Listen, he may ask us questions. It's not because he doesn't know the answer. Sometimes we need to hear the answer. Sometimes he's sparking these things that he's already put in our hearts. We need to hear the answer. What things, Jesus said? The things that happened to Jesus, the man from Nazareth, they said. He was a prophet who did powerful miracles. And he was a mighty teacher in the eyes of God and all the people. But our leading priests and other religious leaders handed him over to be condemned to death. They crucified him. This wasn't what they thought was going to happen. They had doubts now. They had questions they didn't understand. That's a hard place to be and to feel comfort sometimes. I don't get it, Lord. There's families that I know that sometimes it just feels like, Lord, too much for one family to handle. I don't understand why it would go that way. Going back to City Hope, we had one particular woman that we had a call, and she had lost a loved one, so we went out. A couple weeks later, she lost another loved one, and so asked if we could come back out. We did. We got word when they were attending one of the funeral services that somebody else didn't show up, and they hadn't been able to contact them, and it turned out that something horrible had happened to that one, and to that family member as well, and I just... Your heart just breaks. You mourn for them. Lord, too much. I don't understand. They didn't understand. It didn't go the way they thought it was going to. Their hope died. When our hope dies, when it looks like it, we have his presence. He comforts us in part with his presence and all that brings. It goes on. We had hoped he was the Messiah who had come to rescue Israel. This all happened 3 days ago. Then some women from our group of his followers were at the tomb early this morning, and they came back with an amazing report. Before their amazing report, we have this expression of we had hoped he was going to do this. We had hoped that he had come to rescue Israel. They had a certain perspective on this, that the Messiah was going to rescue Israel from what they had been experiencing. Israel had experienced so much over the generations. They had been in exile. and been given promises about the exile when they were living away from their home in places that weren't familiar, stripped of everything that they had known. They knew grief. They needed a Savior. They needed someone to come and rescue them. And they got their hopes all up with the perspective that they were going to be rescued now from Roman occupation as a result of Jesus, the Messiah, the promised one, coming and doing what it was written he was going to do. But it all died when he died. And what they didn't understand was he had a different perspective. His perspective just wasn't for now. His perspective was for eternity, bringing together his people that loved him, restoring us to what it looked like to live without having the impacts of evil. Nothing coming between us and him, being able to see him face to face. That was his perspective. Sometimes we miss the comfort because we won't allow him to share with us his perspective. He brings his presence, and he brings a different perspective. And we get comfort through that perspective. It doesn't mean it's still not painful. It doesn't mean we still don't have grief over it. But we are being comforted. We are not left without comfort. He comes with his presence. He comes with his perspective. And then they got talking about this report that they came back and it said that the body was missing. And they've seen angels who said to them that Jesus is alive. Some of our men ran out to see, and sure enough, his body was gone, just as the women had said. Then Jesus said to them, "You foolish people." Watch your tone when you read the words of Jesus. It's really easy to read that in a harsh tone. Spoiler alert, we're going to hear in the story that Jesus made it seem like he was kind of done and going to walk on. And they're like, no, stay with us. If Jesus had said this in a tone that was offensive, the story wouldn't have gone this way. Jesus has a way of bringing correction and perspective to our life that's super sweet, that isn't condemning us, that isn't telling us, you screwed up again. Listen for the tone that you ascribe to his words. You foolish people. Guys, you just don't get it. You find it so hard to believe that all the prophets wrote in the scriptures. Wasn't it clearly predicted that the Messiah would have to suffer all these things before entering his glory? Now he's coming with his promise. He's going back and saying, wasn't this promised that there was going to be hard times and things that he was going to have to suffer, but then he was going to come into his glory. When Jesus comes to comfort us with his presence and with his perspective, he comes with his promises. And his promises for us are good. And his promises for us are that he has the best of intentions, that he'll never leave us, he'll never forsake us. He comes with his promises, and he's reminding them of, this is what I have for you now as my children. And the promise of what's going to come. His promises, both for right now and for what's to come, are absolutely amazing. And they bring peace to our hearts, and they help us understand perspective a little bit more than we do now. And it helps us cast our gaze from our circumstances and our pain to being able to see him and know that he's going to do something with it. He didn't cause it just so that he could do something with it, but he's so good, he's going to redeem whatever it is. And that's a promise that we can hold on to. How many of us have had somebody that you've walked and you've seen them go through something nobody should have to go through? And your heart just breaks because you know that things will forever be different for them. And yet if you stay in their life, you see them laugh again. You see them enjoy things again. God designed us in this amazing way that he can speak to our hearts, even those that don't know him yet, and return joy where we didn't think it was going to be possible. It's not that we forget. It's not that we're not marked by what we experienced. But it's then we're leaning into his promises for us. We're taking these next steps with him. And he's bringing healing. And he's bringing peace. Even when we still don't understand. And we're leaning in and we're learning to trust him with our heart when it's broken. When it's sinful. He still wants our hearts then. And we're learning to lean into that, and that it's safe and that it's trustworthy. He comforts us. He didn't fulfill their expectations in that moment, but he fulfilled his promises of being present, of bringing all of his power and authority to those circumstances, of giving perspective, of a kingdom nature, of a kingdom nature to what they were going through right then. He didn't fix it, but he fixed it. He fixed them. Bring healing to them. We could have talked about so many different ways that he brings his comfort. My heart is that he's been reminding you of ways that he has brought comfort. He does not leave us when we're in a sinful state, when we're in a mourning state. If I can have the worship team come on up. I really want to allow time for us to just respond. If you need to know today that God is right there with you, if you are just walking a personal inner agony, and it could be something recent, it could be you are carrying the impacts of things that have happened long ago. Listen, we were designed to be treasured.